Hey, Tony D with another hot take. This time it's about censorship on YouTube. Probably again, I'm sure I've talked about this before, but recently it's been getting a little bit out of hand. So, for instance, the algorithm now, apparently, I'm told by other YouTubers that the algorithm will de-rank you and demonetize you if you talk about what I talked about in the past two videos. I was talking about Jojo Rabbit, the movie, which takes place in Germany in the 40s, and there are certain soldiers during that time, authoritarian soldiers that, begin with a certain word, and I can't say it without de-ranking this video, apparently. Now, I only have 300 subscribers, and I'm not monetized yet, so I don't know if it does anything to me, but it definitely does something to the bigger guys if they say those words, according to that. So it's just bizarre to me that YouTube would go after people like that. That's not their intent. Their intent is to try to scrub racism from their platform, but they can't. Freedom of speech does cover speech that makes people squeamish and uncomfortable, including very racist, hateful things. And you have to sort of live with that if you want free speech. If you're going to curate it, there's always going to be a problem. There's always going to be a situation, there's always going to be people doing documentaries about bad people, and you're going to end up hurting them. And those documentaries are good for people, right? American History X was about one of these guys in the modern era. And, you can't say those words without talking about that movie. It's hard to talk about that movie, and that movie is a good lesson. Don't adopt that hateful ideology. So you can't really talk about that hateful ideology if you can't say those words. So, as they say online often, and I agree with this, the cure for hateful speech is more free speech and more speech. More speech is better. You may not agree with that, and that's fine. But guess what? If the speech is curated, someday you might not be able to say that. So get on board the free speech train, and YouTube should. The other thing that happened was very bizarre this week was that YouTube and Facebook and I think Twitter banned the name of a political witness in the Trump impeachment hearing. He came forward secretly, and you know what word that means. I'm not sure if they're banning that word, but they're definitely banning his name. And his name had already been public. And the question is, why are they suddenly banning this guy's name and banning videos just because you said this name? This is a very troubling development, especially at YouTube. People's videos have gone down. And I think the answer probably lies somewhere in the fact that, and this is going to get down the rabbit hole, and I don't have the evidence to back this up, so don't blast me. This is just my theory. My theory is that Operation Mockingbird, which was the CIA's operation, never really ended. It kind of stopped for a while and then went right back to what it was doing. And Operation Mockingbird was the CIA meddling with American media, newspapers, television. And the reason they did that was it was sort of the next logical step for them. If you're turning over governments in foreign countries and the only thing you think is stopping you is that the American public hears about it and then, puts the kibosh on it because they contact their representative and say, hey, don't do that. The CIA then turns around and says, well, if we controlled public opinion, then they wouldn't turn around and say that and we could do what we want, right? Yeah, and that would be good for the country because we know what's best. So they went ahead and did that, and by 1976, things had gotten out of hand, of course, because that's an incredible power. And the CIA vowed that they wouldn't do that anymore, and they got chastised a bit. Ironically, the guy who ran the CIA then was George H.W. Bush, who then later became vice president and president. Interesting. I think the next logical step for the CIA, well, the first thing they probably did was they laid low for a year or two, and then they went right back to Operation Mockingbird, but they were just way more secret about it. They probably Instead of having CIA guys contact newspaper people direct, they said, no, from now on you got to use a cutout, which is a middleman. You get him to do the dirty work, and then if things go tits up, you can always kill him or tell him to go away or whatever. So that's what I think they're doing. I think Operation Mockingbird is still going strong. They're still infiltrating CNN and MSNBC and all these things and influencing public opinion. But eventually that didn't become enough, because they also said to themselves, well, if they could write their if they couldn't write their congressmen and stuff, if their congressmen didn't care, if we controlled enough congressmen, then we could keep them from stopping our budget and stopping us from doing these things. So why don't we just control the Congress directly? And I think they're doing a bit of that. The NSA revelations that they could listen into Congress's calls seem very routine and just seem to pass everybody by. That's a pretty horrific situation if they're listening to the calls of everybody in Congress, because a lot of those guys are compromised. Look at Katie Hill. She's in a throuple, having orgies, smoking a bong. I mean, the CIA could get all the info on her and basically tell her what to do all day and tell her how to vote. You want to keep your job? Vote this way. It's not even that hard, I don't think. I don't even think the people in Congress are that invested in their morals that they wouldn't just flip over because they're just lazy and like their job. Or just would get a quid pro quo. You give me a little info, I give you a little info. I want to vote this way. You tell me how to vote, whatever. You know, some people just don't care. They just don't care about anybody but themselves. So I think it's perfectly logical that they got enough people in Congress or enough of their staffers or enough influence that they can influence a vote if things really go down to the wire. And I think they definitely started doing that after a vote came close to defund the NSA. I mean, that came close to defunding. And I think probably on that day we're like, oh, we got to get more guys. We got to get more guys, make sure this never happens again. So that's my theory, is that this censorship is really downstream from what the intelligence community has been mucking around in, because Silicon Valley's next. They need to control the internet. They did control it, basically. They were able to put those hubs on it until Edward Snowden blew it up. But in my view, they're probably hard at work reestablishing everything they lost quickly. And they probably got most of it all back. So they haven't stopped listening. I don't believe for a second they've stopped listening to phone calls or emails, because really what punishment have they gotten? They got a little slap on the wrist. Slap on the wrist. They stopped for a while, and then a few months later, back in action. What is the Congress going to do? They're too gutless to pull their funding or anything. So the next step is to kill the internet, or to control it to the point where only certain things get on. If you say any crazy things like the CIA is selling crack cocaine in order to fund their drug operations or gun running operations, well, that's crazy talk. And we're going to make sure it never gets on the internet in the first place, rather than having to go suicide a guy. The whole Jeffrey Epstein thing reeks of some kind of CIA plot gone awry, that they could have this guy and let him do these horrible, horrible things. As long as he's blackmailing people, they could use him like, oh, why you're blackmailing all those other people? By the way, we need you to blackmail this guy. We're going to push him your way and make sure he, has sex with an underage girl and you get it on videotape, and then we'll use you. And the reason they use these guys is because then Epstein meets with a little accident. So it makes perfect sense to me. Now, you may not be that cynical, or you may say, oh, it's all conspiracy theory. Where's your proof? Where are you going to get proof for this stuff? I mean, it takes years to get this kind of proof. And it usually happens when guys are dying or they're dead and they leave papers behind or files behind. So it takes it's always 20 years after you find out about this stuff. TIA, Total Information Awareness, where they were tracking people and then shut it down, but it's probably back in operation. If there's no real consequences for the CIA, if they don't lose any real money or power, if people aren't fired, what really happened in 1976? Did anybody lose their job? No. Nobody even lost their job after September 11th. So why would they lose their job then? These guys never lose their job, and that's the problem. So something needs to be done. I think that's partly why they hate Trump. Trump is not afraid of these guys. He made noise about consolidating the intelligence community so it'd be cheaper and more efficiently. They're not going to put up with that, and I think that's why they hate him. Doesn't mean that Trump's altruistic, or they are, and they're getting very political too. The agents are showing up on TV shows. We had an agent run for president in Utah. George H.W. Bush being president, that wasn't the same as an agent, because he didn't start in the agency and work his way up. He was a politician who became head of the CIA. But I think those two things run hand in hand, and that's very dangerous. We have a lot of dangerous things going on that our government is doing. Barack Obama basically created a precedent so a president can kill anybody overseas using a drone. I don't think you'd want that. Those of you who aren't Trump supporters, I don't think you'd want that in the hands of Trump. I don't think you'd want that in the hands of anybody. So censorship is bad, and we need to fight censorship tooth and nail, because I think Silicon Valley is the next place where the intelligence community will want to control, and they probably already control most of it. And these guys who just want to make money are ceding the ground because it's just easier and they make more money. And really, they're making that money from you because we're funding this whole thing. We're funding our own surveillance. We're funding our own oppression. So, on that happy thought, those are my thoughts for today. So please smash like and subscribe for my crazy thoughts.